Hi guys, it's Linda. So today I want to talk about writing history, my own personal writing history, and I think it's going to be like several parts. So this is going to be part one, obviously. And what I want to talk about really is how I went from writing to finishing a story. Because you can be writing a lot and always start new project and never actually finish the story, which means finish the first draft. So when I started to write, like when I learned to write actually as a child, like they teach you the letter, and after that I started to actually write whatever story was in my head. And what I would do was like I would either like maybe watch anime and like rewrite the story I saw in the anime, or I would have like my own characters and create like little stories. And generally what I would do would be like start little story by chapters. So I would write like a chapter and then a second chapter and a third chapter, and the chapter would be like different little adventure, and they would be generally very very short because I was a kid, right? So when I was in primary school I would do that, and I would write all the time. Like I would write when people were running, at the break time I would be writing, basically that sort of thing. And what struck me was I never actually finished a story. Like I would have like little adventure but never really a big complete story with like hundred of chapter. No, I would just have like 3-4 chapter of the story, maybe always different settings, and not even all the chapter would ever be finished. And I would also like write stories, and if it were like short stories I would finish very very quickly, so it would be very very short. Then I grew up, of course, and when I was in high school I started on a huge project. So I think it's probably about 120 pages written in French. So it's either at my ex-boyfriend or it's at my grandmother somewhere in France. I don't have it here with me, which is a bit unfortunate because it would be nice to reread it, I think, at this point in my life. But it was a story, it was the longest I ever went into a story basically at that point. So it's 120, 135-ish page. I spent a lot of years, even when I started university. After a while I went back to that. So it was written in French. I didn't have a computer at home at the time, so it was written like handwritten, so that's why it's just like it's in a folder. I would like add pages, and it's something that I always did and I still do, except in very particular cases. Is like I start to write at the beginning of a story and I keep going until the end. And at that point I just started it at the beginning and kept going, and I would develop the character while doing writing the story, and I would go like progress on the story, build up the setting, build up the world, that kind of thing. And one thing I never did at that point, starting from that story, something I never do even now, is cut the story in chapter before it's finished. So basically I don't have like, unless it's very particular, like for example Harajuku Kiss is cut in... It wasn't really cut in chapter at first, it was cut in pieces. Because Harajuku Kiss doesn't even have chapters. Harajuku Kiss has dates. Because you have two timelines going in opposite directions. So one timeline go from now to the future, basically. And the other goes from now to the past. So you have two timelines going like that, with two different characters in each, like one different character in each timeline. So for that book I didn't cut it into chapter, but basically I would write from present to future, in that there's a first timeline, and then I'm going to go a chapter or a part in the other timeline, then go back a few chapters in the future timeline, go back. So that's something that that's a very particular circumstances that sort of forced me to cut my story into chapter. Another book that I wrote like that is Fairy World. I'm wondering if I have another one. Demon World is cut like that. So Demon World is a third book of the series, it's not out yet. And yeah, the others two, like Demon Soul and Demon Fairy, are being re-edited. So if you ever want to get them, it's going to be better to get the new version. Like, definitely, I urge you, please get the new version when it's out. It's going to come very soon, so don't go get the older version unless you want to have a comparison between the two. But, well, it's your choice. Anyway, so Demon World is also cut in chapter, but that's because I have 5 different point of view in 5 different settings, maybe a little bit more at some point. It's a very complicated story, and it was a lot of fun to write. So I would write a part like this character does that, and like simultaneously this character does that, and this simultaneously this other character does that, and I have like 5 groups of character doing different things in different places, and it was very, very good. Like, I really enjoy writing that. So anyway, we were back at my high school time, and so at that time I didn't cut anything into chapter, and still now I don't cut anything into chapter. So I write from point A to point Z. And in between, like, I don't really plan my stories, so I know the beginning, I sort of know the ending, and I know like key point in the middle. And then I just go from A to key point number B, key point C, key point D, until the end of the story. So sometimes I don't put B, C, D, like B, C, D, E, F, whatever, are really, really not like spaced properly. So sometime, like, I'm gonna spend like 100 page between A and D, and then 20 page between D and K, and you know, like, it's just really, really weird. But I have my key point and my key scenes, like that kind of things that go. But at the time when I was in high school, I didn't even have that. I didn't even know how the story was going to end. It was really like written on the go, and probably that's the reason why it never got finished, because after a while, like, I would write when I was in high school, I didn't write for 3 years, and then I went back to it, and it feels so weird, because also, like, when you evolve, when you're in a part of your life, when you learn a lot of things and you're evolving, it becomes a little bit more difficult to actually write the same story again and again. So yeah, going back to it was really hard, and it's not finished. Then, so after that, I didn't write for a while, except I was doing my PhD in Belfast, and I started, like, English was all around me. I started to, like, be able to communicate in English. I would speak English with mostly everyone, except a few people who didn't, like, who could speak other languages than English. I would speak sometime, like, I would speak French with my fiancé, obviously, at the time, the guy I was with at the time. I would speak, like, a little bit Italian with a friend, just for fun. Like, he would, like, we ended up with having, like, 1 hour once in a while, so that he would actually teach me more Italian. I would try and speak, like, a lot of different things with different people, a little bit of Chinese, a little bit of Korean, a little bit, you know, like, crazy things. But the main language I was in was English, and the main language I wrote in was also English, and on the internet I was making friends with English speakers. So I started to write for a game. I started to write for a game. It was called Make a Baby, and this is going to be important, so it's going to come in the next video too. At that point, like, I started to write in English, and I would only write in English, like I wouldn't write anything in French. I tried at the time to continue that French story I was writing because I really wanted to finish it, but it was like, it was too old, I guess. It wasn't something I could just go back easily because I saw so much problem with it, inconsistency that I wanted to fix, and it was like, it feels so hard because it was so different than who I was at that point. So the evolution of me kind of killed the story in a way. So yeah, that's how I got from writing in French to writing in English, and from that point I wrote my, like all my paper I wrote in English for my PhD, and I wrote my PhD memoir in English too, and that was it. Like, and then I was writing for the game, which was fiction, because when you write papers, when you write thesis, it's not fiction. Yeah, like you have all the facts, you know exactly what you have to say. It's very like compartmentalized. You have like those little boxes of fact and things you need to explain, and you do the theory, you do the result, you do the conclusion, you know, it's very, very well defined. But for the game I could just write whatever I wanted, and so my imagination kicked in, and I would write story at length, like very, very long thing, and I would role play with other people, and we would create like sort of story. In the story with the roleplay never went too far, like never enough for something consistent. Like I had one with a vampire that was very, very long. It was like 8 or 9 page on the forum, something like that. But the rest of them were just like very, very short, like a few days of role plays spread like in a month or two. And so it was not really consistent, so I couldn't really do anything. But I would write, like I wrote, that's when I started to write Vampire Heart. You can find Vampire Heart on my blog every Friday, so the blog is in the description below, the blog link. Every Friday I have something coming up, and this is the longest story I ever wrote, and it's not finished yet. I still write on it like every year or something. It's a very long and interesting story, and I don't know when or where, yeah, I don't know if I'm ever gonna finish it. But it's a very nice story for me to write. So I was like doing all the thing, and then my friend came, like I had a friend in that game, and she said, oh, it's November, I'm going to be doing NaNoWriMo. And I'm like, what the hell is that? And she's like, it's a National Novel Writing Month. You need to write 50,000 words in a month. And I'm like, 50,000 words? I had no idea what 50,000 words actually look like. All I knew was, okay, that's 1,666 words a day, more or less, like 1,667 is more accurate if you actually want to be like inside the border, because otherwise you're gonna have like a few words missing. But anyway, so she said, yeah, I'm gonna do that. I'll do that every year. And I'm like, I didn't know it existed. So I went to the website, registered there, and decided I was gonna write a novel. But I couldn't work on Vampire Heart. I needed to write a new story. So I went to the game, I picked one of my kids, and that was Brownie, if you know what I mean. She's the main character in Demon's Soul, well, one of the main characters in Demon's Soul. And so I picked Brownie, and I wrote Brownie's story. That's how it came. So I started, and that's how actually I went from writing to being like kind of serious about it and finishing a story. I think NaNoWriMo taught me how to finish a story, because so I was writing my novel and I decided, okay, 1,666 words is good, but someday I might not be able to write anything, so I have to write more. So I decided to write 2,500 words a day, and that's what I did. I went from like my sort of fantasy happy writing to a like very decent 2,500 words a day. That was my limit. I could write more, but never could I write less. And that's what I did, and that's how Demon's Soul came. So I was writing that, I was participating in meetings, because in Belfast they had like a group of people who would meet on Mondays and sometimes Wednesdays, and we would just go to the cafe and drink and write together and talk about writing and write again and that kind of thing. So I would do that. I was really very serious about that. I would just like, the first thing I would do would write. I would just do my words as soon as I could in the day and go to the meetings and update on the NaNoWriMo website and keep going. And then 50,000 words came, but my story wasn't over and I was disappointed. I was very happy because I finished, but I was sort of disappointed because my story wasn't finished. And so I registered for NaNoFimo, which is in December, and I went with it and started going at it, and I wrote, I think, 120,000-ish words. And like, after that, it was over, like my first draft was done. And yeah, so that's how I went from writing stories I never get finished to writing a full novel draft. So of course draft I've lost the problem, but that's going to be in the next discussion, I guess. I guess I can stop here for today. So in my writing history, this is part 1, and you know how I went from sort of writing to finishing my stories. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to subscribe and to give me a thumb up. I'm waiting for your comment. I always answer comments. And see you next time for something else. Have fun whatever you do. Bye!